Hello. Alright. I think I might have the music too high. As always, I never know what to do about this, so let me know if I should turn it up or whatnot. Cool. I think we have a couple people in here. Let me take a look myself so I can see what's going on. Yeah. All right. So this is just a quick follow-up to the panel video that I posted last week, actually. I got a lot of really positive feedback about it. It's one of our favorite panels to give. I just wasn't really sure how it would translate to an online version, but it seems to have done well. And if you've not watched that, it's in the YouTube channel, but it's essentially what our basic overview on not just detailing, but also what materials to specifically use for that. Originally, when I first made the panel, it was just an introduction to thermoplastics. And I kind of gave it on a whim, because I thought, oh, everyone knows this stuff, you know, this is kind of pointless, but, you know, I'll give it anyway. And, yeah, no, it turned out that most people have not had a chance to screw around with, like, all the different types of thermoplastic. So people really liked it, and so at every con, I just kind of kept modifying it, and then eventually it has kind of morphed into this. Do you want me to take her?
No, it's both of them.
Oh, okay. Give me the Hammy. Give me Hammy. I'll take her. Hammy's being bad, apparently.
She's just trying to play
Oh,
with the
my Hammy. Hammy. You'll be good? She doesn't like to be held, so she won't stay here that long. But it's Hammy. Hammy's normally not on the camera. You want to sit here with me? And not bother your mama? Alright. This is the cow butt, by the way. You can see her. No, okay, well, alright. Get in your box. Alright, bye-bye. Oh, there you go. Stay there. Anyway, over time it has become more of a detailing type of panel, because I think that's what people are the most interested in. But anyway, one thing I didn't get to do there that I actually do in person a lot, when I remember the supplies, is to actually kind of compare and contrast the different materials. Because again, kind of the main point of that entire hour presentation is that there's no one material that's good for everything. I keep a lot of different stuff on hand because depending on what I'm making, something might make my life easier. I think if you say, well, my spending for the year is this one roll of something, and I need the something, and that's what I'm going to use for all my costumes. I think that's fine. There's a lot of these that you can make work in some capacity. Like if I was going to pick just one of these to use for all of my costumes, probably brown warbler, because the thing is this is sticky and this is really good for large structures like bracers and breastplates and that kind of stuff. And yeah, it's not as smooth as the black, but you can make it smooth with some effort. Whereas if I had the choice of two of these, I would use this for all of my base stuff, this for my top layer, especially things that I want to be really detailed and smooth, and then combine them. But, you know, you don't necessarily have to have a huge host of materials. I do think that learning how to use lots of different stuff does save you a bit of time in the end. And a lot of times when I start my projects, I kind of look at it and I think, well, what do I want this to look like when it's done? Do I need it to be really smooth? Do I need it to have lots of really fine indentations or details in it? Is it something that's like so detailed I can't really sculpt that out of Warbler? You know, having a game plan ahead of time is what really allows me to choose what material to use. So like, for instance, I think I used this as an example in the panel, but for this headpiece, this is, again, a combination, because you need something really strong, something that's structurally sound for this portion, And then for the horns themselves, I really wanted this texture right here. And this is something that probably is not going to show up as good. With Warbler, you can get a little bit of it. I've done some feathers out of black and pearly, and it shows up pretty okay. But this very, very clean indentation here, that's going to be tough to get with the amount of filler and grittiness in any Warbler line. I think that this is best for foam clay, any Ava foam you could cut these kinds of lines into, or this is Thibra. Which, as I mentioned in the previous panel, is something that's very bubblegum-like. You can get a ton of detail out of it, but then the problem is that it's really not structurally sound. So, or sorry, it is structurally sound once it's dried, but you can't mold it and form it the way that you can with something that has filler and you can bend it and it'll keep its shape like that. Thibra is just going to turn to bubblegum and then it's going to suck. But for this, the inside is some foam. So that didn't matter as much. The main thing was trying to keep it from bubbling as I laid the Thibra on top of it. So we have a combination here. Thibra, Warbler for the base, foam on the inside, and actually this piece right here, these pieces, these are also Warbler. I actually originally tried to do this out of Thibra because I thought, oh, it's so fiddly and smooth and that'll just be easier to do it out of Thibra. And no, it again was too much like bubblegum. I tried to do it, but you see how these are really, not even this one's geometric, but there's very straight and gently curved lines here. There's no rippling going on. And that's again because of the filler. This will keep its shape a tiny bit. Whereas with the bubblegum, no, I made this and it was like really wonky and like lots of rippling going on and none of the straight parts were straight and I threw it in the trash can because I didn't like it. So that's just something to bear in mind. I have a very hard time sculpting with Thibra. Don't really recommend it. Sculpting by hand, if you want to use a thermoplastic, cool. Otherwise, you know, something with a little more strength and hold to it, like clay, like foam clay. I have an easier time doing that. I think Thibra is just simply too soft to sculpt with properly. It's best for something like the horns, something like mold work, where you don't want any of that filler in there. Oh yeah, yeah, and so Ashley says, I've always wondered how that was made. If you guys have questions, by the way, I've got like 2 from Instagram that I'll go over at some point. But if you guys have questions, definitely pop them into the chat. This is mostly a Q&A type of thing. But yeah, for this is mostly thermoplastic. I actually didn't need to reinforce the horns, believe it or not. Originally, I was going to put like a screw up here. Because this is just Thibra that just stuck onto the Warbler, but it's stayed, so whatever. So to contrast, when I wanted to make not this guy, bubblegum, this was I knew I really wanted to look like this. I wanted something really heavily detailed, something very sculptural, lots and lots and lots and lots and lots of little fiddly bits. So this would be an impossibility to make out of thermoplastic. I would not recommend doing that. Yeah, you can sculpt thermoplastic, and I have done that before. A couple years ago, I used to do that a lot. This is sculpted thermoplastic. This is Celestia's crown, and all these little horses everywhere are black Warbler that I heated up more than you normally should. If you heat black Warbler up, or any Warbler up to a certain point, it's going to become a lot more malleable, and you can push it together almost like clay. You can get rid of all of the seams that way. Always have to use gloves. It's way too hot to use your hands with. I do that anyway because I'm stupid. Whatever. But you can essentially push it around like a really hard clay. And you can create some pretty cool sculptures out of it. However, it's kind of expensive. And also it's it's not super crazy heavy, but for something this large, it would become really weighty. And to be honest, this isn't quite, like, I like this, don't get me wrong, but this is like 5 years old. And the level of detailing here is not quite what I would want anymore. It looks fine, but I don't think I could get any finer detail than this. I think this is probably the limit of what I can do out of thermoplastic. So for this, to make a sculpture, I knew I needed to sculpt it in some capacity. And maybe that sculpting could be out of foam clay, which, you know, like its name, it is a clay. You can sculpt with it. It's kind of like a really soft clay though, and it's hard, and when you start using it, when it's really, really moist, it's very, very soft. So it's actually really hard to sculpt out of because it's too soft. We're in a almost bubblegum consistency. So you have to wait for it to dry out a tiny bit, and then you can sculpt with it a little bit. But at that point, it's too dry to buff out the seams. So like, I don't think I could make this out of foam clay. I think foam clay is best for like less complex details, like noodles, vines, branches, stuff like that. But something that you're going to sit with for hours and sculpt the little things, I don't know if I am talented enough to do that out of foam clay. And I know a lot of people have trouble with it. I think someone, that was actually one of the questions in here about foam clay was, can you sculpt with it? And like, yeah, of course you can. Absolutely. I love foam clay. But I know people who struggle with it. Like they have the problem that I had with Debra, where it was too bubblegum-like, and what they end up with, instead of it being like say I'm making a cool kind of triangle piece like this. Instead of it being like up and sharp and really nice and clean looking, it might be like, oh, wonky, because it's got some of those ripples and that kind of stuff in there. And I suspect with foam clay that might be from sculpting it when it's too wet. Because again, when it's there's actually a video in the panel of me working with the foam clay, both when it's moist and when it's more dry. And when it's moist, that stuff does not have any structural integrity. Like if you take a noodle and you hold it up like this, it goes whoop, really, really fast. So I think if you try and sculpt with it like that, you're going to end up with all of the ripples, and like it just doesn't look very like professional. It looks like don't know what you're doing, and that's not your fault. That's because it's too soft for you to do anything with. So I think how temperamental the foam clay is, the fact that you have like such a small window for it to be workable but not too soft and also not too hard, I would not try anything like this. I think it's great for edging, vines, you know, stuff where you are not going to be working with it for more than like 5 minutes for each small piece. And then you can work in like batches. So like I love it for vines. I used it for vines on Helga. Actually, do I have a picture? I think I can even put like a picture in here. I have like this whole folder of Helga stuff because I had to compile it for my build book, and so it's just full of details. Yeah, where is it? C22. Yeah, here we go. What even song is this? My default is always just to put on Zelda, and I don't even know what this is. This sounds like a little village song. No. I don't... Oh, it might be Long Line Ranch. I don't know. I don't know enough. I'm a fake Zelda fan. Okay, here we go. Let's add a picture. Image. Ooh. What the hell? Okay, now I don't know what I'm doing. Okay, I'm adding a source. I just want to add a picture. Okay, what if I just did display capture and I just did that? How about I do that? Hey, okay, there we go. All right. So this is an example of what I think is like a perfect use of foam clay. If you guys can see, the little branches on the bottom of this pauldron shoulder thingy ball, that's all foam clay. And the nice thing about that is all you need to do is it's something that's made up of lots of little pieces. And if you think of it that way, you just roll out a little noodle of foam clay, takes you just a couple of minutes, and then you can put it on there to dry, and you don't have to worry about it drying out or being the right consistency or anything like that. And then you essentially just work in lots and lots and lots of pieces to make your object. I think that is a much better use for foam clay than making one large thing that you're going to struggle with it drying out and having to tweak it and all of that kind of stuff. I guess Helga's a really good example of various detailing things to use. Like for this shoulder, I had a really good time trying to figure out what to use for what. And that's because if you look at it, all of the pieces have a different type of texture. They all, like the structure seems different for some. Some look like they need to hold their own weight. Some have to be fat, some have to be small. And then some have to be really, really detailed. And so, you know, I could have 3D printed this whole thing probably. I could have made this whole thing out of foam if I wanted to. But I picked materials based on what I thought was going to be easier. So again, branches, I thought this was a great use for foam clay, super straightforward to do. But then for all of the, I don't know if you guys can see, but the little tiny filigrees, you can do that out of foam clay. And honestly, thinking back on it, that would have been a smart thing to do. Foam clay works really great pushed into a mold, but another thing that works great in a mold is fibra. And so that's what I used here. And I think actually the reason I did that is because these big side panels are made out of Warbler, and thermoplastics stick to thermoplastics. And so if I just put fibra in a mold like this, I can just stick it right onto the Warbler and I don't have to worry about glue or anything like that. How you're attaching pieces is an important thing as well. And then for the other pieces, I think these little swirls are Warbler as well, because I wanted them pretty structurally intense. And then we've got more fibra and stuff on the bottom of this piece. But let's see. Yeah, I like Helga. Helga's a fun build. All right, let me see. I think some people have questions. How did I attach these sculpted details to the fabric? So for bubblegum, I think is what we're talking about here. When you're considering what pieces to use for your details, how you're going to attach it needs to be something you need to figure out before you start, because like the worst thing possible is you make the whole thing and then you're like, oh, how do I do this? How do I actually get this on? And you might not be able to do it very well, or you might break the thing. Like it's not a good situation. So kind of on that note, back to Helga real fast. Actually, except I think I closed my window. For this, kind of along that line, I made pretty much the whole thing, except for, you see the little crown that's on the bottom of the ball? That's kind of the part that goes around your upper arm. Like imagine you're shoving your arm in through where the branches are, and then it comes down through the crown piece. So I made the whole thing, and I glued the crown on, and then I went to put it on, and then I realized you can't put a person's arm in that. That's not, you can't. Like, this just bends way too much. I can't put my arm in this stupid thing. And so then we had to pull it off and then figure out, well, how the hell is this going to go on here properly? I ended up using magnets, which is not a great idea. But anyway, yeah, it's, think about your attachments and the shape of your thing and how you're going to get into the thing before you make the thing, because that's going to really affect the kind of materials that you end up using. But for bubblegum, I did not, so there were a couple considerations for this. I wanted it to be able to be permanently attached. I did not want to put it on and off the piece. I thought that that would be really unstable. That would like just not be a good idea if I like put this corset on and then like velcroed it or something like that. I wanted it to be a permanent kind of thing. And so with that in mind, to be permanent, I need to be able to get this object on and off my body. So this is what? Okay. So for it to be permanent, I need to be able to take it on and off. And with a corset, you know, ties in the back. But if these hard pieces, if these hard pieces were to say go all the way around, so you see how this stops here? Let's say this went all the way around to the back. And then I've got this hard piece going all the way around here. How am I going to open and close that? Like if it goes all the way to the back, I can't get it on and off my body. So like the same thing with like my iron corset. It stops about like a little bit further than my sides because that's about how the minimum width I need in order to wiggle in and out of it. So make sure that you can take the thing on and off if you're permanently attaching. For this, what I ended up doing, this kind of gone on a huge tangent here, and I'm going to put this down. And I'm instead going to move the camera because I think that'll be easier for you guys to kind of see it. All right. So, again, wanted it really, really sculptural. Foam clay is out for all the reasons that I mentioned. Thermoplastic is out for all the reasons that I mentioned. It's going to be too heavy. I'm not going to be able to get detailed enough for this. So I think one thing I could have actually done is I think I could have used foam clay if I'd have used the same quantity of molds that I did now. So for this, what I did is I used regular clay, so like a sulfur-free sculpting clay, and I essentially sculpted this whole thing. These guys are hand sculpted. Some of these guys are hand sculpted, but the majority of this is actually made from a mold. I had a whole bunch of silicone molds that I purchased, and I essentially stuck the clay into the mold and then stuck it on the thing and then kind of like tweaked it and arranged it until it was in the way that I wanted it. And then when this whole thing was finished out of clay, I molded it out of a Featherlight resin. So this is all one solid piece of resin. It's pretty lightweight. I thought about making it out of foam because, you know, you can put foam clay in a mold and it looks super great. And you can also buy foam that you can, if I'd sculpted this whole thing and then made a mold and I could fill it with foam and have it out of that instead of resin. But my worry about using foam clay was like specifically up here. Foam clay isn't clay, it's a lot more like Ava foam, so it's a little flexible and it does break. Like I've broken pieces on my Helga vines. It's not particularly sturdy. So I was really, this is resin, this is really solid. So I was really afraid about the foam clay breaking, but that would have been an option actually, and that would have kept it really, really light. For the resin attachment though, I've had some experience with this. I've done this a couple times, and what I do, can I actually get in here? Whoa, shit. Okay, cool. So I don't know if you can see. No, you can't see this. All right. Well, imagine a piece of warbler right here, essentially. Oh, there's Finny. What I do is I take focus. Focus. All right, there we go. I take a piece of Warbler. It's my friend. I take a piece of Warbler, and then I use Barge, which is a contact cement, and I glue it on the inside of the thing. And then that's a really, really solid hold. That's going to stay put. It's kind of come off a teeny weeny bit right here, and that's just because I've been like pulling on this a whole bunch. But once the Warbler is on the inside, I can then warm up the Warbler, another piece of Warbler, and sew it to my fabric. When Warbler's warm, you can get a needle through it pretty okay. You could get it through it when it's not warm, but like it's hard and I don't like doing that. So heat it just a teeny weeny bit, and then essentially sew it to your fabric piece. So then you end up with this thing that's got a piece of Warbler, and this thing that's got a piece of Warbler, and then heat the two pieces of Warbler up and smash them together. And it's a really, really strong bond that should not come off if you did it properly. And the other reason I really like it is because it means that this thing is really flush to the fabric. It really bothers me when the armor pieces float. So like another option would have been like I could have put snaps on this thing. Something like that. But then like the snap is like this far off from the fabric and it'll float, and I don't like that. I really like it being super flush up against it. That's the way that I attached all of my bones to my Necromancer corset as well. I've used this technique quite a bit, and I like it a lot. I don't know what happened to this thing, but I guess I'm gonna put it down. All right. Thibra, and didn't really know the difference between Thibra and Warbler. Yeah, they are. Thibra and Warbler is super not the same thing. When Thibra came out, I was like infuriated that everyone kept being like, oh, it's a Warbler substitute and I'm gonna make a bracer out of it. It's just like, no, this is just shit. I distinctly remember Mango Cyrene Fawnita was like the only person who was just like, this sucks for a bracer, guys. Don't do it. And good for her, because she was correct. This is not for a bracer. I actually have some samples here. So this is Thibra. And you guys can kind of see, I could even like rip this if I wanted to. It's not insanely thin, but as you heat it, it does flatten out a little bit. But God, it's really smooth, super, super smooth, pretty flexible, extremely reusable. These are technically reusable to a point. Once you heat them over and over and over again, they do kind of become a little grainy, a little bubbly. And also, like, I have stuck, like, the black to the brown, and then it just makes a mess, and then I can't separate them again, and so, whatever. This 100% completely reusable with absolutely no extra effort. Do not ever throw any of this away. You can have a bunch of little scraps and just mush them together, and you can create a flat piece like with your hands. You don't like need to take any effort. In general, I don't throw this away either. But I have had situations where, like, especially if I've like stuck something to the mesh Warbler, it becomes harder to recycle. But like this stuff is super, super reusable. I like it, but I like it for certain applications. And actually, why don't we just compare these four pieces while we're at it? So, this is mesh. Again, this is crazy, crazy sticky. Like, you guys can see how glossy this is. This is all of the glue. And then this is our mesh backing on the back. But we can bend it in multiple directions. And because of this mesh backing, we can stretch it a whole bunch without it tearing. This is really good for attachments, fascinators, something that you really need to not break. So like if you have like a big old feather and you don't want it that thick, I would probably do the front part out of something like black and then back it in this. Only thing to bear in mind though is that this is the sticky side. Ugh. This side is not so sticky. So you really need to bear that in mind. If you're sticking something to the mesh side, you need to do it really, really well. Heat it up really, really well. I think brown is probably best for that, to be honest. This isn't that sticky. But just be careful if you're sticking something to the mesh portion, because there's really not as much glue on here. This is the sticky side. But, comparing it to the brown Warbler, this is the glue side, this is the less glue side, and this is the grain we all know and love. Also the ASMR. Did you guys see my ASMR video? I'm like big nerd, and I'm like, well, I already made all this stuff. I'll just make an ASMR video with all the footage I have. So I'm just gonna do that every time I do a tutorial. I'll do a tutorial version and then an ASMR version. So anyway, this is the grain, and then if we compare it to the grain of the black Warbler, it's very hard to see, to be honest. I think you can almost hear it better though, like that's the sandpaper and that's charcoal, which is not as rough sounding, if that makes sense. In person you can feel it a bit better, you really can. And then Pearly is pretty much the same. Like I said, they're extremely similar materials, except whatever the activation thing in the Pearly is quite different. It loses heat a lot faster than this, in my opinion. I'm like the kind of person who, when I go and I work with Warbler, I'm like, I heated it once and now I'm going to work with it for as long as humanly possible. And so it took me a really long time to kind of get used to this. But it is smoother, which is always nice. It's a nice shortcut. But I wouldn't buy both of them. I don't think... I think they serve the exact same purpose. Last one. Did not mention this in the panel originally because it ain't for detailing, is Transpart. So Transpart Clear Warbler is only Clear Warbler in the fact that it's sold by the Warbler company. It is nothing like Warbler. This is PETG essentially. I'm assuming it is. It looks just like it. And is it? Okay, cool. This is a really thin PETG, and it's clear, and that's cool, but it does not contain the kind of sticky glue that these contain. This does not stick to itself, much less any other type of Warbler. These will stick to it because these stick to plastic, and this is plastic, so you can, if you use like brown, you can get some stick going, but like, there is not glue in this. This is for clear stuff, if you want to be a cool kid and make something clear.
Super glue works well.
Yeah, super glue works, except you kind of see the glue a little bit. Also, as you heat this, it's a little bit temperamental. If you heat it a little bit, it remains clear. If you heat it a shit ton, enough that you can make 3D sculptures out of it or bend it really, really hard, it begins to cloud a bit. So it's kind of hard to use. I think it has very specific usages. I haven't used this in a while, to be honest, but it's really similar to Warbler makes something called crystal art now, which is essentially this in pellet form. So think of it like a friendly plastic, but clear. And that also has similar properties. If you heat it up a bunch, it clouds up a little bit, but that's cool for making stuff like gems. This would be fun for like wings, for like little dolls and stuff like that. But yeah, this is cool. I like this. It's a fun thing to have in your arsenal. Alright, I'm gonna look at some questions. Where do I get inspiration for the types of details I add? Ooh, that's hard. Yeah, I guess I do a lot of classic art stuff. I've been wanting to do something like bubblegum for quite a while. Like a very religious iconography type of thing that's been on my to-do list. I really like Baroque stuff. Loki is very like classic Norse inspired, and his shirt also has a lot of knotwork on it. This is also kind of very Baroque as well. I do a lot of that shit apparently. So yeah, if I have like an idea for a theme, a lot of times I'll then go onto Pinterest and kind of look at works of art and like kind of related fashion, and just kind of get an idea for like some inspiration. And usually I'll add like 50 things to a board, just to get some ideas going, and then narrow it down when I'm done. If you're interested in like actual design process, there's a live recording from I think like 2 or 3 weeks ago on this channel, where me and 3 other cosplay designers kind of talked about how to get started with design and the design process, and how to kind of go from idea to the sketch. So that was really fun. Definitely check that out if you're interested. But yeah, I think a lot of times with design details, I will start with like one idea. Like with bubblegum, it was definitely, I wanted these big sculptural things on her. And then I basically designed the whole costume around that. And like I knew I wanted some kind of religious sculpture with like angels and that kind of thing. So I had the vague idea, and then it was like, okay, well, cool. In order to make this, I need like the actual details and what these little things look like. So I looked up a bunch of old statues to kind of see how did people, what kind of actual little shapes go onto these things? How did the cherubs look? Like, do people use these little Baroque filigrees and stuff? And you know, with her, these types of filigree things, it's not really what's actually in old church art. Like this is kind of, I did this because I had a mold that looked like that. It had the right aesthetic I was going for, but at the end of the day, I wasn't gonna like die on that hill where, oh, this needs to be directly taken from only blah century cathedrals or else it's not accurate. Like, who cares? It's a cosplay. So I thought, oh, I like how these molds look, and I'm going to use these molds even if they are not historically accurate. I don't care. So I mean, I'm all about like the feel and like what looks good and what I'm happy with if it saves me time as well. You know, I'm not going to be a huge stickler for that. But yeah, I really love Pinterest for that kind of stuff. And I do a lot of sketching, and I'll usually sketch something out and then change it like 18,000 times before I'm done as well. But yeah, old art, because people know what this stuff looks like is the other thing. Like, a lot of us know what Baroque art looks like, a lot of us know what Old Norse art looks like, and so it's really easy to evoke the kind of like feel you're trying to communicate if you're using something that everyone understands. So that's kind of a shortcut I tend to use. Let's see. Do I have to go to materials that I use for my project, or does that depend on the project itself? Do I have to go to materials that I use for the project? I'm not quite sure what that means. If you want to clarify, unless I've already talked about it, because I talked like a shit ton already. Yeah, let me know what you mean by that, because I'm
like go-to materials?
Oh yeah, go-to. Okay, if you mean go-to materials, like then
materials that you always use?
Yeah, yeah, I mean, Warbler, foam, clay, resin. It's a shit ton of materials, to be honest. Like, I am fully aware that most cosplayers do not work with all this stuff. I know that, and I do not expect anyone to do that. But because we are experienced with these, it means that we can pick what's going to be easier to work with for a certain project. So that's an advantage of knowing how to use lots of different stuff. I do not think that's a requirement, though. That's just because that's what makes my life easier, and I like it. Lately, I've not been using thermoplastic as much for details, though. Now that foam clay exists, that's my new favorite thing. Because, you know, making freaking 3D sculptures out of thermoplastic ain't fun. It's hard. And it's time consuming and it's heavy. And so if I was going to do this crown again, I would do it out of foam clay. Like, absolutely no question. So, you know, things come and go. Foam clay is pretty new. I think foam clay is only like a year and a half old, if that. But, yeah, we keep a lot of stuff in the house and then just pull something out when we need it. Oh yeah, thermoplastics for bases are really nice. You say that. You say you like thermoplastics for bases, but then we're gonna make you a whole breastplate out of foam. So.
But like for the crown, like things where you
yeah,
want a lot of strength in a small piece.
Yeah, like foam's great, but then I worry about foam ripping sometimes if it's too thin, like that kind of stuff. So. Thermoplastic is super good for base pieces. What molds did I use for the Thibra? I think what I did is I searched for like Baroque, and I searched for filigree, which did give me a ton of stuff, and I searched for, they're not really floral, there's a lot of flower stuff. I just searched a ton, for different stock molds. They're pretty common. There's a lot of molds out there. I have made my own molds. Like, if there's something that you just can't buy, like, just sculpt it and make it. Like, I've absolutely done that, but I liked these. There was already enough of these Baroque molds out there that, like, why would I make them myself? Like, just buy them. There's no shame in doing that. There were some on Amazon, and I think I ended up actually buying them on AliExpress because there was more, and they were cheaper. Recommendations for resin for beginners. So one thing, what? Yeah. So one thing to bear in mind is, resin is something that takes time and unfortunately money to learn. Unlike foam and thermoplastic, which I think are very forgiving materials, and if you mess up, you can kind of finagle it and either fix it or redo it or reuse the stuff, and even like if you mess it up, it's pretty good looking. Like I know my very first thermoplastic breastplate was like, but it still looked good. Resin is not forgiving. If you mess up resin, it is gone, and all that money goes in a pit, and you have to start over. And sometimes you have to do that like 3 or 4 times before you get it right. So just remember that once you get into the world of mold making and resin, you can be a beginner at it, but you need to expect that you may not make anything successful for a couple times, and you need to be willing to commit that time and that money and that learning process to it. Because we're working with chemicals here, and it's more akin to baking than kind of being artsy with your hands. If you screw up the ratio of the chemicals, or if you were like us and used latex gloves to do this, you are going to contaminate your chemicals and something is going to go wrong. However, if you want to get started, we always use Smooth-On. Smooth-On is sold by a company called Reynolds Advanced Materials. We're really lucky that we have one in Boston. Look for one in your area. Technically, they do sell this on Amazon. I do not recommend buying it, though, because, again, chemicals. They have a very short shelf life, and I have heard stories about people receiving these expensive things from Amazon, and they don't work, and it's not their fault. It's because they're expired. So if you buy it, try and buy it in person. You can also buy it from their store online, and they will send you something that is not expired because it's their product. But Reynolds, Smooth-On, that's pretty much like the only one, I'm gonna be honest, that I've heard of. I don't necessarily recommend the stuff in Michael's because, again, you've got the same expiration problem thing. I know people have success for gems with that, although again, it depends on if your stuff is expired or not. So like if you're talking clear plastic gems, that's a little different because actually the smooth on stuff is not great for perfectly clear things. But for like literally anything else, smooth on carries a lot of different types of resin. So this thing is called Featherlight, and it's specifically formulated to be really, really lightweight, but it's not quite as strong, I think, as regular resin. Usually what we use is something called 325 clear cast, I think. Let me check. Clear cast. 325. Smooth cast. Smooth cast 325. Yes. So that's kind of the go-to that I see the bulk of people using. And it's just like it's easy to work with. It's not perfectly clear, so if you're like, oh, I need my perfectly clear gems, that's not what that is for. It's got like a teeny bit of a yellow tint to it. But, you know, if you're making a colored gem, that's like completely fine. If you're making literally anything else, it's totally fine. And that's pretty much what we use for like everything. There's some exceptions that you need something different. Like if you need to do some kind of slush cast, if you're trying to get all the bubbles out. I know there's flexible types of resin that I've never gotten to use before, but like there's a lot of different stuff out there. Smooth On also makes molding materials. So when you go to make something and you're working with resin and molds and stuff for the first time, what you have is let's pretend this is my sculpt out of clay that I made originally. You have a master, the thing that you want to duplicate. And then what you need to do is you need to create a mold of your master. So you need usually some kind of soft, flexible material like silicone, which is why everyone uses that. So you would pour the silicone all over this thing, probably make a box mold out of it. And then when you remove the master, you're left with this silicone box that's indented in the shape of this thing. And then you take your box and you fill it with whatever material you want your duplicate to be made out of. In this case, it was resin. Smooth On also sells stuff like foam. You can fill it with all kinds of stuff. So you need a good amount of materials, and kind of the way you do it can change depending on what you're making. Like if you're making a box mold, that's the easiest thing. For this thing, it was too big actually, so I ended up making I don't remember what it's called. It's not a glove mold, it's something else. A matrix mold. Is it a matrix mold?
When it has like 3 parts, it's a matrix.
No, it was like a one-sided mold, but then I put a mother mold on the outside. Okay, I made a one-part mold with a mother mold on the outside. Anyway, there's a lot of different ways to do this. And for me, I think it's a lot of times the hardest part is because I make these like weird-ass things. And then I have to figure out like how to make it work and how to make the molds work and the colors and stuff. So like, it's a little tough. But there's a lot of really good resources out there. Brick in the Yard is one that I've watched a bit. Anytime you do anything, you always want to watch like tutorials and go on YouTube and stuff. And absolutely watch a lot of tutorials before you start on resin work.
Smooth On also does.
Oh yeah, Smooth On also has their own videos that are really, really helpful. Egg Sisters also has a handful of things if you're looking for something specific. But yeah. Oh yeah, for gem work, I think a lot of people like, maybe that one is called Clear Cast. There's Cast and Craft, yeah.
A lot of people who make gems, who are like prop makers, get their stuff from Tap Plastics.
Tap Plastic?
TAP.
Cool.
Because they have like a clear up.
Yeah, so yeah, for gems, people have done the Cast and Craft stuff, but just make sure it's not expired, and then Tap Plastics, it sounds like. Because for gems, a lot of times you want it to be really clear, no bubbles, and that is not what the Smooth On stuff is. Smooth on stuff is industrial, and so if you want it clear with no bubbles, like, you need an industrial shop to do that. So yeah, for gems, ignore everything I just said. All right, let me see. All right, I think that's all the questions in here. Let me get to the ones. It's a couple in Instagram that I can go over real fast. No, come back. Guys, I am out of my pumpkin Dunkin'. I'm really upset. There's nothing left in here. It's now pumpkin season. Best way to attach details to fabrics. Hey, we already did that. Yeah. I do not like gluing things to fabric. I don't. I get really worried about it. The only time I've ever, like, successfully glued shit to fabric is my Loki shoes. I wanted, like, these boot covers, but I didn't want them to go onto the bottom because I'm a dumbass and I know I was gonna, like, slip and slide all over the place if I did that. So I kind of, I used, Punish Prop had a great suggestion that don't ever glue stretchy fabric, which most fabric is stretchy. Because what's going to happen is the fabric is going to stretch, and then it's going to pull itself off the glue slowly, and then it's going to come apart. However, what you can do is you can glue something with no stretch, such as a piece of webbing. Like, you guys know those, like, things of webbing like this that you put on your backpack and stuff like that. Webbing has no stretch, and so it's not going to stretch off of the glue. And then you can sew your stretchy fabric to that webbing. And suddenly you're able to now sew the stretchy to the webbing and then glue the webbing to your object, and you have a really good hold. And that's what I did with the bottom of my Loki shoes. I sewed my boot cover to my webbing. I think I have a tutorial on Patreon about this, actually, because I was, like, so pleased with myself about it. Sewed the boot cover to the webbing and then hot glued the webbing around the bottom of the shoe. And, like, I've worn that costume a lot, and I've never had a problem at all with it coming off. I think that's the only time I've ever glued something to fabric. It doesn't! Like, you can't glue stretch! It's just the way... Yeah. But for something else... That wouldn't have worked here. Well... Maybe I could have sewn, instead of sewing the warbler onto the corset, I could have sewn webbing onto the corset. You need something that's not going to stretch. And then maybe you could have glued that onto the webbing. Maybe that could have worked. But you whatever you do, you need to, the thing you're gluing needs to be a non-stretchy, non-movable object to another non-stretchy, non-movable object. And I don't care what that is, but it can't be fabric, because fabric's going to move and buckle as you move your body. So yeah, the warbler thing, I think I like to do that because I can, like, wear it when I go and I put it on myself. So, like, I'll heat up the warbler while I'm wearing the corset, and then I took that big thing and just went blip and, like, kind of stuck it on me, so I knew where it was. But yeah, I think maybe it would have been possible to use some contact cement and just glue this directly to the webbing, but then you can't really do that while you're wearing it because it's going to take, like, hours to set. Whereas putting two pieces of warbler together, that's a very fast process. But yeah, attaching the details is something to really consider. In the earlier Helga example, you know, I had the piece of warbler on her armor, and, you know, I could take some filigrees and make them... Oh, you gonna come up here? Come here. You want to come up too? Oh, Vivi. No. No, she's here. It's just... she's being annoying. So if I had my base piece of thermoplastic armor, I could take some foam clay and put it in molds and then make filigrees that way. But then how am I going to stick it onto the warbler? I can use some contact cement. That's completely fine. Or I can take some fibra and put it in a mold and just heat it up and go boop and stick it right on there and not have to worry about glue. So both are fine. You just have to make sure that whatever you do, you're going to be able to attach it. You're so freaking cute. All right. Is it possible to get really nice details with only foam and foam clay? We kind of covered this briefly earlier. Yes. But you have to make sure that your foam clay is not too moist, or else I personally find that it's hard to get really smooth. You guys know what I'm talking about, right? Like to get a nice smooth line, like a sweep, that kind of thing, without it being like all and bumpy. I hate that. I think the lumpy details like don't look great. So that's why like having a little bit of filler and a little bit of firmness to whatever you're sculpting is really nice. I think you can do it, but with foam clay, like your window of workability is like so small that like it behooves you to try and piecemeal that stuff together, I think. I don't know. I say this as someone who's like about to start a big foam clay project, so like we'll freaking see how that goes. I don't know. Hi, what are you doing? You just gonna sit here? What are you doing? Alright, well, Vivi's just hanging out now. Hi. This is the crunchies. Alright. Does anybody else have any more questions? Because I think we've gone through everything. If not, I'm just going to sit here and pet my cat. Hi. You're so cute. Okay, now this is the farm song. Or the song that Teresa sings.
That's a Panya song. That's not the same as
Oh, the Apanya? Is this the Apanya song? I thought this was like the horse girl song.
Yeah, but it summons a Panya.
Oh.
Or a Ponya.
Ponya?
I don't know. That's debate.
I don't know. I just know this cat is really cute. Vivi, no one can see you down there. There. All right. Perfect. All right. Well, if nobody has any other questions,
You want to talk about finishing Warbler?
do I want to talk about finishing Warbler? Not really, but I guess I have to now.
You don't have to. I'm just trying to help.
I was gonna turn the stream off so I could go pet Vivi. I can talk about. God, you look insane right now. I guess I can talk about finishing Warbler. Sorry, I'm just like obsessed with how cute this cat looks right now. So the level of finishing that you need depends on what you're starting with. To finish this guy takes a bit more than to finish this guy. However, you can get them both to pretty much the same finish. Ah, god damn it. Focus! This webcam sometimes, man. I like to use Flex Bond. There's a lot more primers out there now, but like as of a couple years ago, there weren't a lot of wonderful options. This was actually used to be part of my original deck for that panel. I had like a whole finishing section. There's gesso, there's wood filler, there's XTC, whatever that stuff's called. The problem with both gesso and wood filler is I actually really enjoyed using gesso a lot on Helga because you could build up layers really, really fast and then sand the shit out of them, which is what makes things smooth. Lots of adding and sanding. And so I really liked doing that because I wanted a really, really smooth finish on Helga. But gesso and wood filler do not flex. And you know, you can be like, oh, well, this bracer is really hard, it's not going to flex. No, it probably is, because to get it on your body, especially like a breastplate, any kind of armor piece, you're probably going to be flexing it at least a tiny bit. The only exception might be like a pauldron might not flex, or like I have this big bird feather bracer thing that I put like 4 layers of Warbler on, and that, Vivi, come on. And that does not flex. It does not. So for stuff like that, you could use wood filler, or gesso. And I think those are really great, because you can sand them a whole lot, and you can get a really, really smooth finish. But what happens is if you have that, and then you go to open your bracer to put it on, you are going to crack it. And then you're going to have all these cracks in your paint job, and that's going to suck. So unless you are absolutely positive that your thing does not flex whatsoever, you need some kind of flexible primer. That is also not going to be XTC. Is that actually what the darn thing is called? XTC. Yes, XTC 3D is something that Smooth On makes. It's actually intended to finish and blur away the lines in your 3D print. People have used it on to finish their stuff before because it makes a pretty nice, smooth, shiny finish. Doesn't flex whatsoever. It's also kind of really hard to use for curved surfaces. And in large quantities. I've not had wonderful success with it personally, but Scone has apparently.
You have to use really thin coats.
Yeah, you have to do it really thin, and I'm impatient. So again, if you need a flexible thing, Warbler started selling something called Flex Bond a couple years back. It's actually kind of an older product at this point, and it looks like a really thick milk. So it's thinner than gesso is, which means it requires more coats, which isn't fun, and you also can't sand it, unfortunately. You can like apply some water and smooth it out because it's water soluble, but essentially what you want to do is you just want to paint it on your thing in a thin coat, avoid brush strokes, and then probably do that 2 or 3 times. I think I usually do it like 3 times with black, or 2, and then 3 or 4, probably 4 times with this. Only downside is you do have a small amount of brush strokes, but like unless you're being like really anal retentive about it, it's probably fine. I don't care that much. I say that, and I know I'm going to care with the next thing I make, so like, but then there's other things that you can add. I know actually Plaid just came out with a primer, and I know Beverly a couple years back was reviewing a flexible primer that you could sand, and I never looked into that because I haven't made any armor since then. But we have a armor project for Katsucon that we're gonna do, so to be honest, I'm gonna need to look into this because I do really like Flex Bond. But if you want something like with a crazy smooth metal finish, you probably need something else as well, just because you might have a very minute amount of brush strokes in there. But Flex Bond's super easy to use. Just slap it on and you don't have to do any other work, and it gets that kind of grainy out of your Warbler texture. And you also need something to seal your foam with as well. You know, you don't need to make the foam smoother, but you do have to seal it in some capacity before you paint it, and so priming it with something like that is very useful. Yeah, I have not wet sanded it. I've honestly not had much luck applying water to it at all. But yeah, I don't know. The amount of strokes that are left in it is like so negligible. Like unless you are like just you really want that smooth ass finish, like it's fine. As long as you don't like glop it on and do something really wacky with it like that. But yeah, I don't know. I need to like look into new flexible primers because I gotta think about it. another thing to bear in mind is the more details you have on the thing, the more the strokes don't matter. Like, this is all flex bond. And like, yeah, if I like look really close, probably can't even see this on the camera. Let's see. All right, horse. You see how there's like a little bit of this rippling right there and like on the horse's head. Oh, here we go. Here's a good one. Right there. See that kind of texture? That's just from it not being perfectly smooth. That's like that's a combination of the flex bond and a little bit of the black warbler texture showing through. But like, the shit is so dense. Who's going to see that? No one's. I have to like shove my face like way up in that and know what I'm looking for in order to see that. So like, the more dense your thing is, the less it really matters. Like on my black warbler feathers, I just slapped 2 things of flex bond on it and I'm just like, cool, I'm done. Like, there's no one can see any remaining texture on this because it's just so darn dense. And there's all these like lines and scores and stuff in it. So I think the very perfect smooth finish matters a lot more if you have a perfect smooth flat item. But for detailing, nah. You just need something that flexes and something that gets a bit of the grain out. All right. Yeah. So I'm very new with it, but I haven't had too many brush strokes. Yeah, definitely the same thing. It's kind of a rarity if I really bork it up and have a big brush stroke in it. And if that happens, I just apply water and take it out again. It's really, really thin stuff. I've even seen people thin it down more, but like, no, I don't have the patience for that. It's fine. If you're really worried about brush strokes, you can always thin it down, but like, it's pretty thin already, to be honest. I know that's what Warbler like recommends, but like, do what you want. It's fine. Oh, okay. Well, now we have Finnick too. Man, we've had like 3 cats in this stream. Finny, what's up? This is Finnick. He's a dick. All right. Any final questions that folks have? All right. If not, I think I'll probably close this off. I'm thinking of maybe doing more streaming stuff over time. I don't know. It might depend on what people are interested in. But yeah, thank you guys for watching. Hopefully this was very helpful. If you have any questions, you guys know where to find me. And I actually have one more panel that I have pre-recorded. This one's on extreme wig styling, and I did an online version of that as well for New York Comic Con's little online thing. So I'll be uploading that probably in like either next week or the week after, depending on if I get off my butt and make another Calm cosplay video. So stay tuned for that. And thank you guys for coming. Hope this was fun and you learned something.